My name is Ernestas Norvaišas, and I'm working on the game called Sweet Transit. It is a logistics simulator for building a colony, and your goal in this game is to build a huge, thriving colony using only trains, which is a huge logistics challenge, which was seen in the beta. In this talk, I will want to talk more about my career and how I got to this point, which should be interesting, I hope so. I will try to be more game dev from this side. So a little bit about me. From the early age, I started experimenting with various 3D software, which was basically for my hobby and modeling. I used a lot of years practicing, but I did not got this quite high level of skill. I got very specific skills to model high poly and these hard surface models, which was a good start for me, but it was not enough to find a job in the game industry. The usual problem is that you need experience to get a job, and you need a job to get experience, right? So that was the same problem that I faced when I started searching for jobs, which is, One thing that I noticed is that biggest companies are usually requesting this experience, but smaller companies have separate job listings in their websites, in which you can usually bypass this experience just by accomplishing some kind of task, which was in my case. So I started by finding the games that I liked, that I played, and I contacted them directly through their websites to see if they have any job openings or they just need some extra hands. And most of them actually replied. The ones that got further, they asked me to do some kind of tasks, which was just a modeling task, and I had to register how many hours it took me and the difficulties I faced in these tasks. And everyone that accepted the task just started having an interview with me. So in the interview, it was pretty straightforward. People wanted to know how do I approach my problems and how do I solve them. They threw around many questions with various different problems to see how did I manage to go around them and to see if I can do them right. After that, I had several job offerings, and most of them were not very satisfying in salary-wise, because I'm quite junior without any experience, and people looked at me like that, which is normal. One company actually paid for my time that I was taking the job, which was very unique. And they offered me a 1-week test in their site, and then we could talk about salary more, which was promising for me. And that company was Factorio. The first week I came, it was very, let's say, interesting to see how the game industry actually works. Usually what you hear is that you need to come a job at 8, you leave at 5, and it's very strict. The first week I came, from the office they said don't come at least until 10 o'clock or something, because there will be no one in the office, everyone is sleeping. And so I came 10 o'clock, and one person who was sole in the office met me, and he said, okay, so you're the new guy. He was also an artist, so he at least knew what I came there for, what I'm going to do there. He showed me my desk, which was very nice to see, because they had 2 big monitors, which was twice the size of mine at home. So it felt very, very great sitting at that chair. But the problem arose that with the first task, they asked me to make the terrain for Factorio. And one thing that I never did terrain in any game, at least I didn't do any terrain. And Factorio had this unique terrain which was not the usual in games. Usually in games you have this big texture which is repeating in all directions. In Factorio you have various sizes of sprites which are also repeating. Every sprite should match the other sprite at the walls, and those sprites can be in varying sizes together with some edges, and well, basically it was a chaos in my mind for me because I didn't know how to achieve that and what was the process. The good thing was that the artist said that the art director will come only in a few days. He was just busy. He did not have time, basically. And I have few days to figure out what I was doing to just don't get axed. So at first it was hard, but just using improvisation and asking people around, the ones who have experience and have a lot of skills in various areas, it was very useful to, it was very easy to actually do the tasks, because once you start problem solving, the problems actually are not that hard. It's just in your head. In Factorio, I learned a lot of skills, and it built the foundation that I can now safely and with confidence at least build my own game, because I at least know what the game system should look like inside, what it's, how the process should be to make a quite quality product. Because if someone knows Factorio, they should know that Factorio is very high quality with bug-free product. So with this interest in learning, I also wanted to make my own project, my own game. And I started making a Factorio clone. I started using Unity, which at first was okay, but very fastly I saw the limitations why Factorio did not use a game engine, because it did not make sense rewriting all of the rendering systems and the game logic just to use an engine. So they made their own. Unity is very great for many projects, which is the goal of it, but it's not perfect in any of it, because it's made for everyone, so it has limitations. So I dug around and was looking what people are using besides Unity and Unreal Engine. What are their other frameworks? So I found a monogame. And monogame has quite good games under its belt. It has at least Stardew Valley, which is quite popular solo dev project. And I decided to use that. I started just by figuring out how to render images on screen, which was difficult at first because I never done anything like that. In Unity, just drawing a sprite on screen, it's automatic. And now I needed to figure out what Unity is doing actually to make it my life easier. The good thing was that I always could rely on Factorio team and ask the professionals how are they achieving this high sprite counts and this good performance, which basically helped me to lead the way to this project to develop it further. At some point, I figured that if I'm going to spend on one project so many hours, which was, I believe, a year by that time, of course it was only weekends, but still it was gathering hours. I decided to make at least commercial project, to make some profit out of it. And the first thing I did is just pivoted from my current game idea to something that wouldn't be a direct competition to the game I'm working for. And I call it Sweet Transit. At first I dug around in the Steam and tried to figure out what was the, oh, that's a hard word in English, the market was like. I wanted to figure out what people were buying, what people were making, and basically to just create a big spreadsheet to figure out where is the biggest window for me as a solo developer where I could use my skills and make something that could potentially make some money. And that came out to be a city building game with logistics. So I started just figuring out how people are designing games, because at this point my skill base was mostly technical. I knew how to program, I knew how to make graphics, but I lacked the skills of designing how to actually engage the player, how to make him want to spend more hours and fix problems, which took a lot of hours and months basically to just make this game idea concrete, what I want to make, how the game should look at the end. After working for some time, Factorio reached the point where it came out of early access, which was 1.0, and it was a huge success for them. For me, it was kind of an interesting period because at the end there were not much art jobs left to do because everything was quite polished and the company mostly was bug fixing. So I took 1 month vacation just to experiment with my game and just try to flesh out the idea further to see if I want to do this. So after that month, I went back, did some projects for Factorio, which were mostly canceled because technical limitations. You know, like in the game industry, you always have many ideas, but not many of them are feasible. So for me, it was frustrating because I spent time, I tried, and everything got canceled, so it was quite frustrating, even though it was not my fault. So I left the Factorio 2019 or 20, and I decided to just see what I can achieve on my own with this game because I saw the potential. I knew the market was there. I just needed to make something that was playable and enjoyable. And I made several plans. I knew that I will be able only to sustain myself for 2 years without a job, which was okay, I guess, but it was very limiting for a game developer. So first plan was just to make sure that I can achieve something in 1 year time span. If I can't, I just go back to some kind of art job and continue working safely. So I figured the first thing I should try to get is a publisher. Even though I was very skeptical with publishers because they all have these horror stories. They are quite interesting, where the publisher just takes all of its money or have very unfair contracts, and basically people are burned very easily. Of course, now that I work with publishers, I know that there are a lot more horror stories with game developers who are just not making normal games, which I guess I can elaborate on that further with questions. Next thing, if that didn't work out, I thought I will still need some kind of finances to make that game finished. So I thought maybe I could just pitch my game to some kind of indie fund or some other outside financing, which was a good idea in itself, but the problem was that I would still have to market myself, I will still have to interact with community, and basically that would take a lot of time, and for a solo developer, you don't have a lot of time. And the last plan was, if nothing worked, I just release in autumn and see what happens, and if there is any money to be made. So I had to make sure that I'm making some kind of prototype for publishers. I made a plan of what it should look like, basically a vertical slice of early games, so 1-2 hours of it. And the first thing I noticed that if I'm going to continue with my current pace, I'm not going to finish that early slice until the end of the year, so I needed to do some optimizing on my workflow. And everything, including the models, how I model and how I approach the problems, is basically very limited and very improved by tools. I made a lot of tools for any mundane tasks. Now, if I click render on Blender and make an image, it's just one click away until it gets to the game. Everything is optimized to save as much time as possible. Models are also as simplified as possible to look good, but would not take much time for me to make. So I have this hard limit of 20 hours for any model, any train, any structure. If I spend more, I'm just going in the minus. Of course, developing, you always need to test the game, and testing is a very interesting subject in its own. I did one-on-one testings, and I started from very early stages. The moment I had some kind of playable game, even though it looked horrible, it did not have many graphics, I needed to figure out if it's playable, if players are doing what they're expecting they're going to do. So first thing that I noticed is that all of my assumptions are basically wrong assumptions, and yeah, people are so dynamic in their ways how they interact with the computer even. It's just mind-boggling, and the testing is very useful to figure out how the people are going to approach your game. But the biggest thing that I took away from it is bugs, and bugs are, yeah, when people are playing your game not the way that you are playing, you're automatically going to get different kind of interaction with it. And interactions are usually not very, yeah, I lost my train of thought there. So basically there was this one interesting bug which was very strange in its own, because every tester that I played with had no problems with the game. The game loaded up finely, it worked perfectly, there were no problems with this, apart from a few crashes, of course. And this one guy from Austria loaded the game, and for some reason the loading screen which shows the logo, it was just few pixels. In the game it was always night and you couldn't control the day timer. So the logic was there, it was working for everyone else and nothing changed. It was very, very confusing at first. So we started digging and we found out that it had to do with Windows region settings. So in C#, if you convert a number with the default tools, which are basically formatting strings to float numbers, it will convert those numbers differently based on Windows region settings. So for some people, 10.55 is 10.55, right? But in such regions like Austria, it's 1055, so it's a bit different. And these differences made the UI scale not 1, but 1000. And this night would not took 6 hours, it would took 6,000 hours, so it was quite long. So I had my bugs fixed, I prepared some kind of lackluster version, and I prepared this pitch, very fancy pitch, sadly I did not save, of a whole website which they could open and see the game and what it's about. At first, went by 2 weeks and I didn't hear from any single one publisher, which was quite demotivating for me and was quite stressful. Because of course you start to think that, oh, the game is not good, no one is interested, the professionals now see that there is no market, or any one of those things. I started creating the Steam page, started Reddit marketing a little bit. I made one post which gathered, I believe, 2,000 likes and 700 wish lists, which was quite success in my eyes. And after that post, people started contacting me. So I guess they just wanted to see if people are actually interested in the game. Talking with publishers actually took a quite long time, and they are not really organized in that area, because once I contacted them, everyone, of course, wanted to set up a meeting, which took 2 weeks to set up because they're all busy, which is normal. In that meeting, you just say the same things that you sent them in the pitch. They write down the same things, and they say, okay, we will meet you at the next meeting, and you wait 2 more weeks, the next meeting comes, and now there are more people, there are directors, and you need to say the exact same things that they written down in the exact same order, because their questions even don't differ. So, okay, so you do that same thing again, and finally, one did an offer which was very, very strange, because they gave me money, they did not offer any marketing, and they wanted more than 0.5% of all sales. So I dig around that company, and I found out that they have a lot of subsidiaries, where like 30, 20 companies, where there are 3 directors that are repeating all around them. And none of these companies have any games released. They have a lot of trailers of games that are being made. And if the game is released, it has a a very small number of sales, which was, well, alarming. So I said them, okay, your deal is no good, so if we can do this if you run down this percentage lower, because they still were offering the financing. But I did not hear from them from that time, so yeah. And the publisher talking went further. So I talked with any directors, these shareholders, well, I talked with many people, and finally it just took me 3 months and there was still no progress to be seen. They were still talking, there were still questions, and they were just undecided as from the start. So because I had plan B and I don't have infinite time, I decided to make an ultimatum. I just said to everyone, okay, I have 1 week. If you're not offering me anything, I'm just going to go away. And of course, not everyone, but most of them just vanished, which was something that I expected. But few publishers made some interest in me. It was Chinese publisher and Team 17. And Team 17 made quite interesting offer, which basically added options to help me in every area in the development, and most of them even they didn't deduct from my shares. So it was basically from their side, their financing, and they offering a lot of help with a very fair agreement. Working with publishers, I got a lot of resources and a lot of options to test the game more. They have this internal program where people sign up, they get paid, and they test the game in there. And the first thing that I did after signing the contract, I created a new tutorial, because the first one was lackluster. I created a new tutorial. It was a one map and it had a lot more hand holding. I thought that this tutorial was pretty great. It took me around 10 minutes to finish, to read around, finish, and I thought, well, if it's 10 minutes to finish, it's pretty easy to read, it should be great. So we set up this internal testing team, we gathered some people, and let them play for 1 week while recording. So it turns out those 10 minutes for some people were 4 hours, and the easy things for me to read were quite complicated for other people, which makes sense. I'm making the game, I of course know all the rules, and I just, reading for me, the same thing is very easy, that's given. But people who are not playing that type of games, or even playing this type of games, had trouble with it because there are some unique mechanics in it. So we took a long time just refactoring the tutorial and testing again, and finally we made a 3rd or 4th iteration of tutorial, which divided the whole tutorial into separate parts to make the experience more gratifying, more easier. We added a lot more hand holding, while at the same time allowing the players to express more freely. And that tutorial got tested in the beta, and it went pretty well. But in the beta there are people who are playing these types of games, so we will see later. Okay, so this is it from my presentation. I try to be brief as possible, and I'm just right in time, I guess. If you have any questions, feel free to ask them. I can elaborate on any topic further.
First applause. Yeah, so was this a solo project totally? Like Team 17 didn't give you any additional devs to help you out? You basically did the testing and you developed this game all by yourself?
Yeah, it's a solo project. Team 17 at one point offered artist help, outsourcing art. But was still too taxing for me, because I still needed to prepare all of the assets, all of the references, the concept art, and after that I still needed to post-produce and sometimes even retexture the whole models, which was more time-consuming than it's worth. But yeah, it's mostly solo project. But if you look from the other side, Team 17 is doing so much to help that you can't really say it's a solo project, because they have a whole team of designers that are constantly playing the game and trying to figure out what is not working, what's not intuitive. And it's solo only in the way that I'm making the art, I'm programming, and but still the decisions are more global.
What did the Chinese publisher offer?
They were not offering the usual kind of deal of publishing the game. They were offering publishing the game only in their region, localizing, publishing, financing, and basically bringing the game to the stores. And they were only taking their cut from that specific region for quite small amount of percentage from their shares.
So basically you could do both, probably?
You could, but bigger companies, they have the deal that they say that they will take care of all the regions of the countries, and Team 17 is basically taking care of all of them. But yeah, I thought at first it was an option, but the contract says it's no.
Also, did the Team 17 did localizing on other countries, or is the game only in English?
They are localizing even right now. I'm going to localize in Lithuanian, which is going to be our horror story. But people, yeah, there are going to be a lot more languages there.
Did Team 17 ever force you to change something you didn't want to?
No, the contract is very developer friendly. Basically, they can't force me anything, and they need my agreement to do everything else. So it's very nice from that side. Yeah, I know people are getting quite difficult contracts. From talking with publishers, I know that some publishers don't share any data where they're spending their money, don't share any logistics. They don't even ask the developer what kind of price you want for your game to be. So they take everything for themselves.
It's a single player game.
Yes.
So only single player, no.
Yeah, multiplayer would be a death sentence for me. So
have you ever thought about expanding in a small team, or is it like you deliberately work alone and that's how you like it, or is it just you don't meet people who would be interested in joining?
I would like to expand. The problem is that expansion as a sole developer is quite tricky because you will need to introduce the game and the mechanics, everything how it works in the game. So it will take a lot of time just to get the person going. For the artist, you will have to introduce of course, the art style, how it's made, and all of the tools to make sure that the artist is independent from you. So they can make the art, they can upload the art, and you can just inspect right there. For the programmers, it's a whole different story, of course. It's need to introduce the whole code base. And once you do that, you automatically get alien code in there. Right now, for me, it's very easy to fix any problems because the whole code is mine, so it's very easy to navigate for me. But once you introduce new persons, they going to have their own section of that code base, which will be hard for me, easy for them. And basically, it's a hard decision. I would like that, but I don't know when or if I will be able to.
I'm curious of a few things. Sorry if I missed this. The game is not released yet, right?
Yeah.
As I understand, you're obligated to have certain milestones and kind of deliver those milestones in a timely fashion to Team 17.
Yeah.
How often during the week do you have to do progress feedback, and how does it look like?
In Team 17, I do monthly milestones. So basically, we set up they have this internal budget for me, which is basically deduced until I make more money from the game, and I give all of the money back that I borrowed, which is basically this money that they're paying for me and marketing. And the milestone progress looks quite simple, actually. They have few bullet points which are necessary to implement, and they are, until this point, they're always the points we agree upon because we both see the need for them. And we have optional points which are good to have but not required. Only thing that milestone doesn't pass only if you have these requirements not met, or you have some kind of crashes in there. But the crashes are postponed to the other milestones, so you still have a month to fix. You pass this milestone conditionally, you still have a month to fix.
You're obligated to give feedback only once a month.
Yeah,
So that's really
But-
flexible.
but usually just have Discord server and they attacking me constantly with questions, and
If it's not a secret, how much will the game cost in the Steam store, and how many sales are you expecting to have?
sales-wise, I have no idea right now because we look at wish lists, and that is the goal. I don't know if I can share the wish lists, but they're, well, I can say they're less than 100,000 right now. So
Or, I mean, how much will the game be on the Steam store?
I guess it's going to be shared soon. So 22 euros, I believe, which is just a fair price for indie game.
It's for Europe.
For Europe, yeah, because Steam has regional pricing, so I don't remember all of them, but I know it's
What's the
around that.
target audience age?
From our research, is basically 30 years and above that. Yeah.
So it's very impressive how unified the looks are, the graphics. Did you have that vision of how it's going to look right at the start, or did it develop as you were making it?
Yeah, it developed little bit by little bit. I knew what I wanted to achieve, but from this point, I still didn't know how it should look exactly. So it took me a lot of iterations of re-implementing even the ground, because I started with the ground. And I did not like how noisy it was. I didn't like some specific areas, so it was basically constant making something new and looking if you enjoy it. So yeah, it was definitely not just magic first time I know what I want to do. It was just iterative.
Are you still enjoying making this game?
Sometimes no. I mean, it's just a job at the end of the day. Of course, you have a lot of good benefits. You can work from home. You don't have any work schedule. You can basically do anything. Of course, you're not going to get paid then, but you're kind of free, which is really nice. But at the end of the day, you're not going to do that because of the stress for you.
Have you suffered burnout?
Every month or so. Yeah, it's usual thing, I guess, for every game dev.
Have you thought about different kind of financings? For example, Kickstarter, Patreon, doing devlogs and YouTube, for example?
Yeah, so I thought about kickstarting, but kickstarting usually does not bring enough money to sustain the game. It usually is just a marketing endeavor. Patreon and some kind of this video development sections would just take too much time from my work. As I said, it takes a lot of time to just make the game, and you need to market it. And if you're going to make a devlog out of it, just going to eat all of your time that you're never going to finish, which is quite visible in the developers that are making these games, and they are progressing quite slowly. And I believe it's mostly because they need to invest a lot of hours in those videos to make them entertaining.
Yes. I wanted to ask if you studied anywhere after school and just looked for a job right after school.
I actually studied electromechanic engineering for ships, which...
Classic.
Yeah, classic story, yeah. I loved it so much that I quit it just before the 6-month no, you need to go to the sea for 6 months, so practice. So I quit it before that because I knew that I do not want a job like that where I need to sit in this almost like basement room and basically survive there. So I quit it there, and at that point in time, I didn't know what I want to do, and it was really stressful because I had this a potential career which is quite good paying, and my father is working in that career, so it wouldn't be like that I couldn't find a job. And right now I quitted my school. I didn't tell my parents, of course, because that's, yeah. What are you going to say? I quit it, I don't want to work anymore. And it was really stressful, so I started to searching what I can do as a job. And only then I found out that you can actually get paid for making models in game dev. And it was actually quite good business, in the forums at least. When I found out that what they are offering, it was not so, but, so yeah.
So you made models and sold them in the beginning?
No, before I tried to sell, but it didn't work out. I tried to freelance, which worked out to some extent, I guess. But yeah, before that I never really tried this game dev, which is quite obvious when you look at it, where those models come from, but for me it didn't come.
So how long would you say one play session of this game to be from start to finish? Well, for the early access at least, yeah, I can say for the access because you'll have more content. But we tested the beta, and I had these pings of players when they reached certain points in time. They send me to my server a time when they reach that point. So it took them, for the beta itself, it took them around 30 hours to finish. Right. So did you find it difficult to test for bugs during those later stages of things? It's constantly transforming and you have to keep playing the game for hours to find these potential bugs. Did you encounter any issues there?
With bugs itself, actually no, because most systems are quite modular in a sense. So if you test the early game, you are most likely test 90% of the late game because you test those systems. The difficulty came in balancing because the longer the game is, the longer you need to play to see how it progresses. And usually the early game balancing is very influential to the late game balancing. And yeah, so the balancing is the biggest issue right now, to just reach that point in time. And once you reach it, you see, oh, this doesn't work. Why it doesn't work? You just step back and try to change some things, play from that, and yeah, a lot of hours basically.
Okay, I guess, yeah, lots of questions, very cool. So, big thanks. I guess you'll stay. But,
yes, of course.
we can chat later. So.